Hey everyone, welcome back to the People Analytics channel, and today we're getting back on track looking at the top 10 metrics you can use to start your People Analytics team from scratch. Now the metric we're evaluating today is a lot of fun. It's return on training investment, and we're actually going to take a bunch of HR talent management stuff, but we're going to incorporate some finance measures that maybe you're not as familiar with, the discount rate, net present value, and so forth. Now traditionally a lot of companies have struggled connecting their L&D investment to return on the business, but if you've been watching my other videos, you know that there's a way to take an employee's time and convert that into a productivity factor. And essentially all we're doing with this formula is determining what impact does L&D have on that productivity factor. Once we know that, we can convert the productivity factor into a cash inflow and utilize net present value fundamentals to calculate our return on investment. It's going to be a lot of fun. Again, keep it simple. And if you are new to this channel, please click like and subscribe, and let's start learning. As with every video, I love to start with the Einstein quote, and he really emphasizes simplicity. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Now, the whole goal of People Analytics is to make executive conversations better. Now, today, this is actually a very important maxim because we're going to be integrating HR talent management with some principles from finance. As we go through this presentation, you'll see that there's some Excel formulas, there's some strange calculations you may not have read before. Remember, keep it simple. All we're trying to determine is we bought some classes, we created an internal program. What return did those programs generate in terms of employee productivity? Once we know that, then it informs us whether or not we can invest in similar courses or similar programs in the future. So remember, keep everything simple no matter how complex the situation actually may be. Continuing on our series of the top 10 metrics you can use to start a People Analytics team from scratch, we are now at number 6. Wow, making progress. So we've covered the top 5, but remember, everything is connected. So a lot of the content that you've seen previously will actually apply to return on training investment, and that's purposeful. You want to have a portfolio of measures that are fully connected and integrated with a broader improvement method. Now, a lot of what we do for the top 10 series is descriptive statistics. If you're wondering why you don't see machine learning stuff, if I'm not really covering R or Python, that's because that comes in more advanced discussions, but these baseline metrics are required to get your team started, and that's what this video series is about. Now, the People Analytics value chain, if you didn't get a chance to see my prior video, it has some really powerful information, and I go in detail about why each step and the proper sequencing is important. But essentially, I just want to highlight, again, if you want to understand whether your HR strategy is actually enabling the corporate strategy, it's important to have a value chain that goes through the proper sequencing from planning your staff to creating the proper culture and D&I vision, making sure you're retaining your top performers, and then you move into the more operational things related to employee sentiment, leadership assessment, and organization effectiveness. Just one note on this, I got a lot of comments from folks asking where performance reviews, compensation and benefits sit, policy and planning, for example. Those all fall under organization effectiveness. And as you can see from the analytics value chain, that is the last step in the process. So when you see companies emphasizing that, hopefully they're doing all those other steps well. As part of the HR analytics value chain, you want to ensure that the data science team is actually engaging in a structured set of processes to ensure that each step is being handled correctly. And when it comes to data science, really 6 activities are at the core of People Analytics. It starts with HR data governance, then it moves into descriptive modeling, and then you get into the fun stuff, kind of the holy trinity of data, and that is machine learning, consisting of supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and then you go into those Markov states where you're trying to develop ideal scenarios. Once you've done that, then the more senior data scientists actually optimize the portfolio of models, where you're taking all of the stuff from descriptive modeling, supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement learning, and making sure that it's connected to a broader improvement method and adding value. In terms of the formula for return on training investment, please try to check out my prior videos on employee productivity and learning days per employee. That'll give you a solid understanding of the methodology being used, and then you'll understand that before incorporating some of the finance concepts related to discount rate and net present value. But in terms of the formula components, remember, keep it simple. It's only 5 things. We calculate employee productivity. We track time to salary conversion. So basically, once we have a productivity factor, we want to determine how much salary does that translate to. We look at learning days per employee as well as the costs of those learning days. And then from that, we integrate finance using the discount rate to actually discount the benefits of productivity as well as the L&D cost. Now ask yourself, what kind of discount rate should we use? And the answer is attrition. The higher the attrition, the less valuable the gains in L&D. Now don't freak out. You see a lot of numbers on the page and you say to yourself, I'm in HR. I can't do this stuff. It's actually pretty simple once you understand the process. First step is you calculate employee productivity using the Parkett and Pam and SAD methodology, and then from that you do an assessment of what impact L&D had on that productivity baseline. Once you have that assessment, you then convert the productivity number into a salary estimate. So essentially, if you've increased productivity 1%, you times it by the employee's salary, and that gives you annual benefits derived from learning and development. From that, you take your discount rate and you discount all of your benefits based on the time horizon. Now ask yourself, how long a time should you track? It should be based on the average attrition of the position. So if it turns over every 3 years, that's how quickly L&D must add value to the business. As we go step by step in this process, I think it'll make a little more sense. So referring back to my other video regarding employee productivity, essentially all you're doing is trying to use the Parkett method to look at the contributions they're making, and then the Pam and SAD method to track the derailers. And essentially the net amount, Parkett minus Pam and SAD, tells you an employee's productivity factor. Now from this, you actually are going to do an assessment tracking how much value did learning and development have on the incremental change in employee productivity. Once you have that number, basically all you have to do after that is convert the productivity factor into a salary estimate, and that allows you to use all the fun stuff related to finance, discount rate, as well as net present value. But the key is you start with employee productivity, and remember, the one universal thing that is the same across all employees is time. We want employees to maximize their time. Step 2 in this process is learning days per employee, and I also have a video on this, so if you want more detail on the calculation, please check it out. But essentially, learning days per employee represents the inclusive, combined, total learning content applied to the employee. So what you want to do is make sure that you capture all of the learning content, not just a specific program, but all of the learning content for the employee. And then also you want to track the L&D costs that support it, not simply the contracting fees or the upfront fees, but the annual maintenance costs associated with learning and development. So it's an all-inclusive metric looking at total learning content as well as total costs required to initiate the program, sign the contract, but as well as maintain it year over year. Step 3 is actually fairly straightforward. Essentially, all you're going to do is once you calculate your employee productivity factor, you're going to multiply that by the employee's annual salary. And essentially what that does is it converts a time-based measure, employee productivity, and it moves it to a cash flow based measure, which allows you to use net present value and discount rate to calculate the return on training investment. As I've said before, what you want to do is ensure that you're incorporating all of the costs associated with the learning content. It's not simply your contracting fee or your upfront costs to get the program initiated. You also want to factor in consulting expenses as well as maintenance costs to maintain the L&D content year over year. Now, it's important that you actually understand the timing of when the costs occur, because you're using a discount rate, remember, to discount those costs back to the present using net present value methodology. So once you calculate all the costs, you have to make sure that you understand the timing of when those costs occur, and that'll help you fit it into the NPV model. Step 5 is a lot of fun. Now in finance, when you're calculating the discount rate, you use what's called the WACC, or the weighted average cost of capital. And essentially what it means is it's a weighted average of the cost of equity and the cost of debt. And it also incorporates something called beta, which actually doesn't matter for this. But in HR, it's actually a more difficult measure to calculate because you're converting productivity factor, which is a time-based measure, into a cash flow based measure using salary. And the way we do that is by looking at attrition. And think about it logically. If attrition is high, it means your L&D investment is more risky because you're going to have to repeat the course with a new employee. If attrition is low, it actually makes the course less risky because you know you're only going to have to pay for it once because the employee will remain in the job longer. So if attrition is high, it means L&D investment is more risky. Moving into step 6, and it's really a lot of fun when HR integrates some financial concepts and is using more advanced methods to calculate a lot of its content. You see, even our domain can do some pretty sophisticated stuff. Essentially, what we've done is we calculate employee productivity, we convert that time-based factor into a cash flow factor using salary, and then we discount the cash inflows or the benefits of the L&D on productivity, as well as discounting the cash outflows or the L&D costs, making sure we understand the timing of when those costs occur. And the discount rate we use is attrition. So the higher the attrition, the more risky the L&D investment because you're going to have to repeat the course with a new employee. Lower attrition, the less risky. Once you do all that, you're basically going to determine your net cash flows. And once it's fully discounted, anytime it's above 0, it's actually a positive investment. And you'll see it on the next slide how the formula works. Now remember, this slide probably makes a lot more sense now. When you think about the time horizon, how long we should track this stuff, we now know that it's average attrition. So if an employee turns over every 3 years, that's the return that L&D has to generate for it to add value. In terms of the discount rate, we know that the attrition rate is used because the higher the attrition rate, the more risky the L&D investment is because you're going to have to repeat the course with a new employee. Essentially, you convert employee productivity factor, a time-based measure, into a cash flow measure using salary, and then you discount the cash flows, the benefits, as well as the L&D costs, and that gives you your total NPV. You divide that by the investment, and your return on investment is there. Now that was a super fun video, and please, if you have any questions or you want to know exactly how this could work from a use case perspective, just reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can talk about it. Now the next video I'm going to go over is number 7 in our top 10 series, and that is the Leadership Development Roadmap. Exactly what assignments, courses, and assessments should leaders be taking in order to make sure that they're not only performing well in their current role, but also preparing their readiness for their future role. So please join me for that video. Once again, if you like the content, hit like and subscribe, and make sure you keep on learning. This stuff is super fun as long as you keep it simple. Okay, have a nice night.